Hello, everybody. Summertime season. Long time no see. I feel like it's been a month since Corstian and I got together on the podcast. We had a lot of moving parts, and since the NFL started to die down with OTA starting up, we thought it was a good time to start up our summertime series, which is looking at divisions across the NFL and assessing teams. So we're rolling that back for this year. Given season outlooks, and this will probably change as we find out more free agency moves and unfortunately players that go down and replacements that are bound to hop on to new teams. So, Corstian, it's been forever. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been pretty good. Yeah, it's been this is the quiet lull of the off season as things kind of start getting going with these NFL teams, but obviously we got some fun things in store for the next couple of weeks, so I'm pretty excited to kind of just go in and talk about what we're doing.
Yeah, and this week we are touching on the AFC North. Lots of competitive teams in this division. I feel like I said this last year. I'm probably going to say it again this year because of all the moves made across the division. This is probably going to be the most competitive division in the NFL again. If it's not, it's because the AFC South is equally as good, and potentially even the NFC North. We'll see. Lots of great divisions, and each one of these teams got better in my eyes, and that's just looking at the pure talent of the players they picked up. So lots of exciting teams to get into. We will not waste any more time. We will talk about the Baltimore Ravens. So obviously, the Ravens had one of the most disappointing ends to one of the most promising seasons. Like, I felt like this was their year to get a Super Bowl, and the way they played in the championship game wasn't enough. A lot of self-inflicted moves, and they had to improve at the margins. But Corstian, what kind of snapshot do you look at regarding the Ravens? Like, how is this Super Bowl or bust for them this year? What's their ceiling?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it. Yeah, I mean, Super Bowl's definitely in their view right here. Like when I was looking at their free agency moves, sure, they lost maybe a few players. I mean, they lost the running backs, but they obviously brought in Derrick Henry. But with how well you did last season, this feels like an off season where they maybe added depth and kind of retooled rather than really had a need to fix that many holes. As we can see, I'm looking at their acquisitions that they made via free agency in the draft, and Derrick Henry's obviously the biggest name probably here. But then in the draft, they get a new starting offensive tackle with Roger Rosengarten from Washington. But then the next impact player you have, I think, is Nate Wiggins, who, at least on the depth chart, who's projected to kind of be number 3 on the roster going into the season so far. So it's a very big retooled offseason rather than panic fixing holes or whatever. So I think leads me to believe that they're pushing for that Super Bowl again this season, and I think they have a decent window as long as Derrick Henry's still going 100%.
Yeah, I think Derrick Henry, nabbing him from the Titans was such a power move. I think he's not talked about enough. And when we were covering free agent moves, Derrick Henry was up there, but he's just going to add such a different dynamic and toughness to this team. Unfortunately, with J.K. Dobbins, like the injuries, like just continue to happen year after year after year. And with Henry, I mean, there's no sure thing that he's going to be healthy the entire time. But I think he gives you an assurance that you know what you get out of Henry, and he's only going to make the offense much more powerful in the read option game, and really unlock Lamar, which is crazy to say since he was like an borderline MVP candidate over here. I still see that ceiling for Lamar this season. Looking at their draft picks, it's not like names that like immediately stand out to you, but they're very important guys. Like they didn't get any like offensive high powered receivers. They did get a receiver from North Carolina and Walker, but I really think they're relying on the continued ascendance of Zay Flowers. Like they didn't even bother to re-sign Odell Beckham Jr., which tells me they think this is Flowers' team. You saw that in the way they used him this season and in the AFC Championship game. And I think he's going to be a better player for after his performance there. So they're really high on Zay Flowers. They love him. They still have Mark Andrews. They have Derrick Henry. You're hoping to get something out of Rashad Bateman. So
and they did
I look at this team. What's up?
They did re-sign Rashad Bateman to, I think, a 3-year contract this offseason. So I think they are very hopeful for him to have, a continued upward trajectory.
Yeah. And so like they did lose Odell, which is tough, but he would always get like 1 or 2 receptions. He wasn't that like heavily involved from a volume standpoint. But I think the pieces they added in Derrick Henry and then re-signing Matabuke were like the top priority for the Ravens to get done, and they got it done. So from front office perspective, you got to be happy with this team. You just got to exercise patience here. Who's your second-year breakout that you're looking to see from this team?
I have 2 guys here, one on offense and then one on defense. The offensive guy I got here is Zay Flowers. I think he had a great season last year, but it obviously is kind of leaning towards he's going to be kind of the future receiving threat of the franchise. And if he has a big slump year this year, I think it spells bad everywhere for this Ravens team, just because all of a sudden a guy that you expect to kind of elevate your receiving game kind of has like a second-year slump and makes you a lot more one-dimensional in your play. So I think just, continuing his upward trajectory, I think would be huge for him. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Trenton Simpson, a guy who didn't have as much playtime last season. Obviously, BC was further down the depth chart, but now he does have this opportunity to kind of show what he has. He was one of the top off-ball linebackers in last year's draft class that I liked. And so, when he was drafted, I figured he was going to be the replacement for Queen. And so it's going to be him and Roquan. So it's, I'm excited to see, and hopefully he does really well on this defense too.
Yeah, I just saw that Trenton Simpson's getting starter reps, so the team thinks highly of him. We'll see what happens. I know we had talked about him in the draft last year, and we'll see from that perspective. But talked about Zay Flowers a lot. I'm really in love with the player. Ever since like last year's draft class, he's the second-year breakout for me as well. I think the offense is going to go as high as he can go because he is going to unlock this passing game, and Lamar obviously is a great thrower at the ball as well, but I think he just added a new dimension that this team sorely needed, and Ravens did a great job scooping him up. As far as schedule, where's the floor and ceiling for this team?
I didn't necessarily look at the schedule, but just kind of a generic floor and a ceiling for this team that I envisioned is kind of on the floor would be 9-8. And this would be, the case where Derrick Henry maybe is kind of exiting his prime. Zay Flowers, has a kind of a slump season. Maybe Andrews still needs some more recovery time, or he, something along those lines. And so if offensive issues persist, 9-8, but my ceiling for them is 15-2. They were first place last season in the AFC. I think, at their very best, they could be one of these just ridiculous record teams. Realistically, I do think that maybe a 13-4 type record makes sense for them, kind of what they did exactly last season. But just looking at this team and basically the huge upgrade at running back, you could see like the potential of them maybe winning 1 or 2 more games than they did last season with just, players developing plus the addition of Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I'm looking at their schedule right now. There's a lot of teams, like if I looked at the schedule last year and be like, wow, this is actually a really brutal schedule. But I could see them split against the Bengals. I could see them lose their first week against the Chiefs. They could lose to the Cowboys. I don't think it's going to happen. They could lose the Eagles. They could lose the Texans. So, like, I'm probably projecting this team as, like, at worst, I think they split all their division games, and then lose to 75% of the teams I mentioned. So I would probably pencil them at worst at 10-7, and at best 14-3. So when you said 15-2, I don't know, because to me, like, 14-3 and 15-2 are a lot different in perspective. Like, if you only lose 2 games all year, that's insane to me, even though it's literally just 1 game away. But
yeah,
like, I think the perception of the team is, if a team wins 15 games, you think they're going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I kind of have that feeling about the Bengals, and that was a horrible take, unfortunately, with Joe Burrow getting hurt and them going off to a slow start. But, like, I'm with you. I think you could chalk this team up to 11-13 wins, provided the key players stay healthy.
Yeah, and so that's why I listed that as a pure ceiling. And realistically, I did say 13-4 is probably a more realistic take. Like you said, 13-14 win team, or 12-14 win is kind of realistic. But firing on all cylinders throughout the entire season, a 15-2 is feasible for a team like this. Is kind of what I was thinking here.
Okay. What do you think? What do you think the team's strengths and weaknesses were? What do you think the Ravens' weakness was?
Last season, are we going over kind of like last season's weaknesses, or like what we think going into the season will be their weaknesses?
Yeah, no, good question. I was more picturing this as, like, when coming from last season, like coming off that championship loss to the Chiefs, how could this team, like, address their weaknesses? What was the weakness, like, you noticed just watching them? And then, like, and what strengths do you have that you think will continue on this season?
Yeah, that's good, because that's what I was envisioning. That's like what you wrote for the notes, but I just wanted to make sure that that's what they had in mind. But last season, I think a bigger weakness of them, or one of the greatest weaknesses, was their running back room. I mean, technically they had great players, but the great players weren't necessarily there the whole time, and so I say that was a big weakness. I think towards the end of the season, maybe there's kind of an issue of maybe like the team didn't feel like they could rely as much on the running backs, just due to, I guess, the lower quality that they had there. And so obviously this offseason, they let go of the 2 guys, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who have kind of just been on and off with injury, and bring in a guy like Derrick Henry, which I think easily fills that hole that they had in terms of their just starting roster right here. I do like the depth they have behind Derrick Henry, but that was kind of like the key, or the number one weakness that I think I saw from this Ravens team last season that resulted in their unfortunate end to the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had a couple players, like, really step up for them. Like Keaton Mitchell, like he stepped up a lot for that team in spurts. And you're hoping he has a healthy season. And then obviously Derrick Henry is going to help. And then you got Justice Hill. So you got, like, a variety like amount of backs here. I'm trying to remember the Ravens UDFA, who actually surprised a lot of people. I thought it would be kind of good, but I didn't expect him to, like, be, like, amazing. But I don't know why I can't find this running. I'm literally just looking for the running back here. Yeah. I am losing my mind here, but yeah, I think I agree with you in the long story short. Their big weakness they saw was their running back room getting hurt, which was supposed to be a strength, because I'm really high on J.K. Dobbins as a career prospect. If you're in Dynasty, I would take a flyer on him and trade for him. He's not going to hurt, like, your team at all. And I think he'll be a solid addition for any team that wants him. But addressing it with Derrick Henry and then having, like, a thunder and lightning combination with Mitchell, I think they addressed that a ton. And I think that was going to be huge. I think their defense was a major strength, We can kind of go into this when we review the coaching staffs, but it'll be interesting to see is there any drop off from Mike Macdonald to Zachary Orr, because I thought Mike Macdonald was one of the best coaches in the league last season, from a coordinator's perspective, especially on the defensive end. So a big question is what's their defense going to be like next season without Patrick Queen, without McDonald? I'll be curious to see that.
Yeah, and that was kind of a thing that I was wondering too, but I do think that this team's defense benefits from just having really good players just across the board and having pretty good depth throughout their defense, at least, so that maybe they don't have as strong, if Zachary Orr isn't as good, they may have a worse scheme, but I think that they have really solid playmakers to at least make up for any poor play calling, at least to a certain extent. We looked at the Broncos last season. 1 week they let up 70 points or whatever, but then they go on a 5-game streak of just, their starters. Not saying that the Broncos defense is anywhere close to this defense, but the key players on the Broncos are able to kind of just overtake whatever defensive scheme calling that was happening to result in just that really strong 5-week stretch before it kind of leveled out back to normalcy. But I think this defense just has not just a couple of those superstars, but just a full lineup of superstars that can at least keep the defense as as a competitive unit that is probably still top 10 in the league next season.
This is more of a general question on their roster. Who do you think is the X factor of this team?
X factor, I think Derrick Henry is probably that X factor for me. If he fizzles, obviously, then it's kind of just they have nothing at running back.
If he has 1,100-yard season, do you think that will take the Ravens where they need to go?
100 yards. And then is that? Well, I guess
rushing.
And then how many touchdowns would you say would accompany that 1,100 yards?
I'm gonna say 8.
8. I'd say that'd be just overall positive. He's that I'm implying from that he's probably healthy all season. I know a strength of his is run block or pass blocking as well, and so I think just a full season there with those yards plus his pass blocking ability makes that a successful push for this team that can get them to the Super Bowl.
I mean, I know Henry could probably easily push for 12 or 14, but I'm keeping into account Lamar's legs. That's going to be a huge advantage in the red zone, right? So, I think it's a safe bet to pencil him in for 8 touchdowns. That's a good one. I was thinking about that one as an X factor. I'm going to go with Kyle Hamilton. I loved his breakout last season. I think he's one of those rare safeties you have to have, and he's quickly pushing to become the best safety in the league. He's going to take this team as far as he needs to. You can't teach those instincts at all. And if the Ravens lose him, I think the defense, I worry about the defense a ton. Even with Matt Buke, even with Humphrey, even with Roquan, you can't replace a guy like Kyle Hamilton and what he does instinctually from sideline to sideline. So he's my X factor for the team.
Yeah.
Okay. On to the Browns. The Browns have one of the worst injury luck you could possibly imagine, and they still made the playoffs, led behind the GOAT, Joe Flacco. How do you see this team coming off of that? It can only go up from here, right?
Yeah. It's a really interesting team because because I think if that same exact situation happened this season, it doesn't go as well. I feel like that was more fluky than that, but I still think that the Browns in general still play good and are competitive in the playoff race, if that makes sense. But I don't know how much better they'll do in comparison to last season, just because I feel like it was crazy how well they managed to play regardless of the injuries that came their way.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. I was sort of shocked that they didn't keep Joe Flacco after that entire run he just had. But I do think Deshaun Watson will be better now that he's had a full season under his belt. I do think the offense will be better. Not because of the Jerry Jeudy signing. I think David Bell will be a better player. Cedric Tillman would be a better player. There's a lot to like about what the Browns have going. And David Njoku stepped up. Their offensive line is still like top to bottom, had the best line in the league. And the one question mark I have is Nick Chubb coming back. If Nick Chubb is 40% of himself, I look at this team very differently. Even with that defense, even with how admirably Jerome Ford played last year. Like, Nick Chubb is one of those guys you can't replicate because, in my opinion, he's the best pure running back in this league. Like, if I just said 3rd and 3, I'm going to run halfback dive, which players am I confident are going to get that first down? Nick Chubb is going to be on a very short list for me. It's probably Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, and that's it. That's it. Just off the top of my head. Maybe Josh Jacobs. Maybe. And maybe Bijan. And I'll keep it at a handful. And that's it. But I mean, like, you can't replace what he does in between the tackles. And I think he's invaluable to a fault. And if he doesn't come back 80% of himself, I worry. I worry with the ceiling of this team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's obviously probably the biggest question, or one of the biggest question marks on this team is Nick Chubb. But I do think that they did a decent job in this offseason, kind of just like addressing their running back room, just in case Nick Chubb isn't fully ready. It was obviously, his season or his injury was kind of like mid-season-ish, and that kind of just makes recovery time tricky. How long until he's 100%? Will he be ever 100% again? Is kind of like the big question marks. But then, you had Jerome Ford, who played exceptionally well last season, but then you add in Donta Foreman, and then you add Nyheim Hines, which obviously those 3 running backs I feel like are very different in what they offer to the team, but
they complement each other very well.
Yeah, it's a really good complementary running back by committee squad that they made behind Nick Chubb if he does need more time to, get going again, which I really like from them this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not like Nyheim Hines suffered an injury on the field. He got hit by a jet ski from somebody else. Like, he wasn't being reckless. Like, that's just an unlucky situation. And I think he is going to add a different element to what the Browns can do through the air. Like, Jerome Ford was pretty good at pass catch. But most of his explosive plays came off of screens and schemed plays. Where with Hines, he's one of those scat backs that I trust to beat linebackers in the North. When you're going against Steelers, the Bengals, the Ravens, very good inside linebackers matched up against running backs, and Hines just gives you that advantage. And that's going to be a lot different than what Sean Watson was used to last season. Not saying that Nick Chubb can't catch the ball. It's just Nick Chubb gives you a different flavor. He can catch the ball, but Nyheim Hines is specialty is his specialty is creating mismatches over linebackers and safeties. Yeah. So Nick Chubb brings mismatches in different ways. And I think that's going to bring something else to the offense. So it's clear they have a strategy. Just talking about their ceiling here, touching upon that again. I think they have a better schedule than the Ravens. Obviously, the Ravens finished first, so that's going to change some things. But I think Cleveland, I would pencil them in for the same ceiling as the Ravens, to be honest, because their toughest matchups to be.
Sorry, I'm just hoping
to be. Yeah, you're good. You're good. I wasn't even looking. I don't even care about you, Corstian. I'm looking at a good tap. So, Obviously kidding, of course, guys. Obviously kidding. But like looking at the schedule here, you got Jaguars week 2. That could be a tough one depending on which kind of Jaguars you're going to see. And then you have Eagles 6th week. I think their toughest stretch could potentially be week 6 through 9 because you got Eagles, Bengals, Ravens, Chargers. But if the Browns could go 2-2 in that stretch, I think they could finish first in the division easily. And that's accounting for the fact that they have to go from Kansas City to Cincinnati to Miami. Because I think they could split against the Bengals. I think they could split against the Ravens. But like what their season is going to be determined on is weeks 6 through 9 and 15 through 18. If they can get out of those stretches with a 4-4 record, I think you can pencil them in for a double-digit season. I'm looking at this team from like anywhere from a floor of like 8 wins to a team of like 12-win seasons. That's kind of like where I picture the Browns at.
Yeah. For me, I'm pretty similar about their floor. I have their floor at 8 and 9, and that's a situation where Nick Chubb is nowhere near ready to play football again. Deshaun Watson still has some type of struggles and whatever other issues might persist with this team. But then at their ceiling, I put them around 13 wins. 13-4 right here. And this just and both of these kind of just come from how well this defense played last season and just kind of how the offense was able to chug along regardless of kind of injuries that came their way and the fact that they were able to win. And so I think that they're a strong, candidate to have double-digit wins. My actual prediction, I guess, is around 11-6 for this team, which I think is, it's a good season for them.
Yeah. Second-year breakout player. I think you can't even go past saying DeJuan Jones. I think DeJuan Jones is going to be a linchpin for this O-line. He's going to already add to the strengths they have on this team. And I get it right now, Jack Conklin might be the starter, but I think the upside of Jones is higher. And I think he's going to help create a lot of great pockets and advantages if the Browns want to go 6-man protections without a running back. I think he can be huge there. So that'd be my pick for a second-year breakout.
Mine was the same. I think that he is another guy where it's like Jack Conklin. He's good. He's kind of, he's played well with the Browns, but he's had a kind of an up and down career. And just if he can be, solidify himself, he can easily sub in as a swing tackle. Not necessarily that is his strength, but they can put him into packages where his skill set is better displayed maybe than what you have with Jack Conklin. Or if injuries arise, I feel like he's a really easy plug and play guy that you're hoping could happen for this team. And obviously, depth is important here. And I think the Browns did a great job just this offseason in general, addressing their depth chart and making sure that behind their starters, they have, quality players. And you see that through the draft and through just a lot of their free agency moves, I think.
Yeah, their draft doesn't have a lot of flashy picks, but you see in the first 2 picks, they address the trenches, and that's what the good teams do. They always invest in the trenches through every draft, no matter what it is. So getting Zinter and Hall, quality Big Ten schools, great upside there, and it's just going to add depth. They didn't need to get those guys because they already have Tomlinson. They added Jefferson, Harris, and then you have Bitonio and Tella, best guards in the league. But who better to learn from the best guards in the league and one of the best defensive lines in NFL? Very, very great pickups there. Quick X factor for me would probably be Grant Delpit. Delpit, just like Hamilton, maybe it's my love for safeties. I don't know what it is. I'm probably going to pick Minka when we talk about the Steelers. But I think Delpit always had the upside to be an elite safety as well, and last season finally showed it. I think his play will definitely round out and complement what the front 7 can do. He's the guy I would look at And then I'll throw another name in there. It has to be Deshaun Watson. Like, I get it. They doubled it in free agency with Huntley and Winston. I wouldn't rely on those guys. Maybe Huntley has the higher upside, and then we'll see what happens with DTR. You hope he can continue to develop and sit behind, because he had an okay first year, and that's with growing pains and whatnot. So, just quick snapshot and X factors on both sides of the ball. But who you got?
For me, I got Devin Bush. I feel like since his rookie year, he's kind of just been on a downward trajectory. And so, if he can kind of rebound and just have another great season or build off of, I guess, what his rookie year was a couple of years ago, I think that'll be really solid for this defense. Obviously, you brought in Jordan Hicks as well, but maybe I saw have Jordan Hicks and Devin Bush. Just, these guys really need to be the guys here just because they will be kind of just the commanders of the defense, as the off-ball linebackers for this team.
Is there any rookie that stood out to you from their draft class?
I feel like this was a very depth-heavy draft class. And so, obviously, I feel like their first two picks, like you mentioned, Michael Hall and Zach Zinter, were kind of the most notable ones. So maybe I'll stick with those, but it seemed like this is a team where their starters, kind of like the Ravens, are all really good. And so it's a lot of depth building and kind of just retooling in hopes for a stronger playoff push this year.
Yeah, I think the one coaching change I do want to point out is Ken Dorsey. I wonder, I wasn't a fan of him when he was in Buffalo because I don't think he unlocked the players he needed to really elevate that offense. So I want to see what he does with the Browns. Obviously, Kevin Stefanski is going to hold the wheel and drive that bus when it comes to offensive play calling. But I want to see, does Dorsey still have a toxic effect on the offensive production, or is he going to have he's going to be better for having the Buffalo experience and learning from that and being a better coach? So I'll be interested to watch that from the coaching side, but that'll be it for me on the Browns. Anything else you wanted to talk about there?
No. I think, that's it for me.
Yep. So pretty simple. Deshaun Watson or bust, pretty much.
Yeah, it really is.
Browns, why did you resign Joe Flacco? You have an easy no to the offense, but whatever. Okay. Steelers time. I'm really excited to talk about the Steelers. Obviously, guys, if you listen to this podcast, I thought they had the best draft class of all time. But no, just the best draft class out of all the teams that picked. Really love what they did from there. Corstian, what is your ceiling and your floor with this team?
Said my ceiling for this team is about 12-5, and then my floor for this team is around 7-10.
Okay. Wow, that's a big spread right there.
Yeah. And so it's interesting just because I just looking at the roster, I think there's a lot of question marks that would honestly lead me to have them playing worse than what I have my floors and ceilings. But I think the Steelers coaching staff is just unbelievably good. And so it kind of boosts them to this. I mean, it's a big spread, but most of my teams have been a big spread where you have the Ravens from 9 wins to 15 wins, or the Browns from 8 to 13 wins, and this is just a 7-12 kind of win.
You're very safe, but this, I can tell.
So right here, I do it. The way I kind of thought of my floors and ceilings was kind of just not necessarily a worst case, but a pretty bad scenario for the team, and then the ceiling is everything goes right for this team. Is kind of how I had it. Realistically, I think that there may be a 9-10 win team this season. And I think this is
that sounds very Steelers-ish. They always float right above 500. I'd probably be a little bit more optimistic with this team. I'd probably say I could see them go anywhere from 9-8 to probably 12-5, like you mentioned. I would probably tighten that spread a little bit. I think the quarterback play is going to make a huge difference. this team was literally a quarterback away from being
Mhm.
like an upper echelon team. You think
Mhm.
about their defense, and you think about what they did from the quarterback position in the offseason. Like, yeah, could they lose the Falcons? Could they lose to Dallas, Jets, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Baltimore? Wow, like just like the Bengals, like the last 4 weeks and like the middle of that stretch, is particularly after the bye, is going to be
Mhm.
huge for them. Like they have a really favorable schedule before their bye,
Mhm.
but after it is going to be the real test with this team. But I think this team gets better as the season goes on.
Mhm.
They seem to play a lot better when the season when the season wanes on, and I think Russell Wilson will make a huge difference. Justin Fields will make a huge difference if Russell Wilson doesn't pan out.
Mhm.
I'm very optimistic about this team.
Mhm.
What did you make of their draft picks?
I really liked their draft. You know, the glaring hole of this team was their offensive line. And so what did they do in the draft? They got 3 linemen to potentially most likely be starting on their left tackle, left guard, and their center position, which I think is huge for this team. But there's also the point of the fact that you have 3 rookies starting on this offensive line, which is a tricky situation to say the least. But I really liked that. And then obviously Roman Wilson, I was a big fan of. I think he feels like he fits the Steelers' culture of wide receivers almost. And obviously Peyton Wilson was one of my favorite linebackers going into this.
Lots of Wilsons on the Steelers. You think they're converting?
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, Peyton Wilson was my favorite guy, one of my favorite linebackers in the draft, and so obviously him going here I think is good, especially because he doesn't necessarily have to start right away and can be maybe more rotational just because he has the injury history.
Yeah, and we talked. I know how much of a fan you are of Peyton Wilson, but I think McCormick was probably their best value selection. Like to see him at the 4th round was stunning to me because I mean, like that's where he was projected to go, but his talent's a lot higher than that. I think he's one of the best guards in the draft, and they got like 2 of them basically. So I think that's going to be huge get for them. Not much to add. Like getting Patrick Queen, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, like Dante Jackson, Sean Elliott, like a lot of great moves. I think they're big. Like I think the weakness that they now have that they didn't have last season was their wide receiver room. Like, but even then, like they have a bunch of guys like Denzel Mims, like Calvin Austin. I love their talents. They haven't been realized yet. So I think that situation can easily change, even though they might not have as strong as a wide receiver room as other teams in the division. I do think you're going to get better production out of them. I'm going to ramble on and on, but my X factor is oh my goodness, that is disrespectful. I meant to say Pat Fryermuth. I mixed up the last name initial and the first name initial, so I apologize, Pat. Major brain fire on my part. I do not know how to speak English, but he had a down year last year, and I really think he's due for a breakout, just given the offensive structure and the no clear number 2 option right now. I think he's going to be poised for a big revamp because if you think about the coaching changes they made with having Arthur Smith being the offensive coordinator, and he loves throwing to the tight end, putting the tight end in different spots. Russell Wilson loves throwing to tight ends in general. If you remember his time back in Seattle, I think he's going to be a lot more familiar with targeting the tight ends. And Fryermuth is an unrealized talent. People forget, like, he's kind of like the forgotten tight end from that Pitts class. And I think he's down for a top 8 season. Which probably isn't saying much, but if you look at the tight ends as suddenly risen up, like that's a big statement.
Yeah. And I guess that's a solid pick. I really like him. I think everybody expected a lot's from him, but unfortunately the quarterback situations kind of sucked for this team, which I think hindered a lot of just the offensive potential that this team had. Then for my X factor for this team, I'd say maybe like Keanu Benton. He's kind of like the young dog on the block for this defensive line.
2nd-year breakout for me. You read my mind.
Yeah, and so like I think him, like their defensive line's already nuts, but like if he turns into a superstar and like develops perfectly, you know, this defensive line would be like on a historic caliber of greatness, I think. With the fact that, you know, TJ Watt, who is probably I'd say is the best pass rusher in the league right now. And you got Cameron Hayward, who's just been, you know, steadily amazing forever. Larry Ogunjobi's a solid opposite. And then if Keanu Benton, you know, turns into even like half of what Cameron Hayward has been throughout his career, I think this is just an absolutely terrifying defensive line unit, especially now that you have, you know, added player and added skill positions in your secondary and in your linebacker room too. Maybe not necessarily have your team be fully reliant on your defensive line.
My bad. Didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, you're good.
You took my 2nd-year breakout, so he'd probably be it. But I think they've had back-to-back great classes. Because you think about what they did last draft. They got him, and then they got Broderick Jones and Joey Porter Jr. So take your pick. Like, do you think Broderick Jones is going to break out? Joey Porter? Like, why not all three? You know?
Yeah. For my 2nd-year breakout, I did have Broderick Jones here. I think the fact that you have, you know, 3 rookie linemen in there, he has like a cool opportunity to be kind of like the slightly older kid, and
after 1 year in the league.
Yeah, but it's like he has just that much more experience on all these other guys, and if he steps it up, like he is kind of the mold for the rest of these rookies to be like, I want to make the jump Broderick Jones does, and I want to learn from him on like how he was able to make that jump from year 1 to year 2. But then if he has an awful season, then it's like I feel like the offensive line almost goes into shambles with just, if he struggles, and then there's obviously going to be rookie struggles, then all of a sudden it's James Daniels and probably Zach Frazier, just because centers gets more assistance, I guess, in terms of blocking responsibilities. But like having at least a strong right side, I think will do a ton for this team here. But so that's why I have him as my 2nd-year leap guy.
Okay. That's fair. What do you think of the coaching changes that stand out? Do you think Arthur Smith will make a huge difference on this team?
It'll be interesting because like we've seen that he's been able to run both good offenses and really bad offenses, and so it's a whole lot of, I really don't know what to expect. Granted, I think almost anything's probably better than what Matt Canada was doing, and so
throwing shots at Canada.
Literally, you talk to like most casual fans, I don't think know much about like their own team's offensive coordinator. You know, they're some of those coaching staff, but I swear every Steelers fan knew who Matt Canada was and wanted him gone so bad. Like the fact that you had casuals saying fire Matt Canada, your coordinator, and not like the casual, because most casuals are like, oh, we see a bad offense, fire the head coach. No, everyone knew it was Matt Canada. And so it's like, at this point, I'm going to say what I say, but I do think they definitely step up, I think, regardless of who you have at coordinator. But I think there's potential for them to do really good this season. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I think the context with Smith is the QB play. Like we've seen what he's done with average QB play and like a great offensive line. with intense. And then we saw what he did with like all those offensive pieces, but a really bad QB. I think he's heavily relying on a good QB, and he's got two of them with Wilson and Fields. So I think people forget Russell Wilson performed very well last season for the Broncos. That was just a toxic situation, like on how management handled it, how they started to begin the year, like lots of toxicity there. I think he'll have a rebound season as a quarterback. Smith will have a rebound season as a coordinator. And I think this team, even though they have lesser talent because they shipped off Deontay Johnson from the skill position standpoint, they still got a lot of great guys like in the room to generate offense, generate yards, generate points. Like that's what wins into this league. So I also think they're going to be better. I think they're going to be magnitudes better, if you ask me. I think Smith was probably better to be a coordinator and not a head coach. And I think we're going to see that play out next season.
Yeah.
Alrighty. I saw Corstian yawn, so he's already tired about talking about the Steelers. Everybody not associated with the Broncos here. Yeah. Yep. If you're not a Broncos team, no support for Corstian over here. A team that's better in orange, though, with the Bengals. We didn't talk about them yet. Very promising season, like I mentioned. I kind of had to bite the bullet on them having a 15-2 record after like the first half of the season. Hoping Joey Burrow stays healthy, looks good, going out there. So I think he's gonna be good to go. I think they're gonna like get back to where they left off. And I get it. They have Kansas City at week 2. They have Baltimore week 5, Cleveland week 7, followed that by the Eagles the week after. But I think their ceiling is that same as the Ravens. I think their floor is 10 wins, ceiling like 13, 14. Like, I'm confident this team is going to be a division winner, if not like a 5 seed. Like, I think you could lock the Bengals and the Ravens for either home court, top 3 seed, or 5 seed. Like one of those 3 spots. I feel confident about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm pretty close to that too. I think their floor, which is kind of just like a disaster season for them, would be something like 9-8. I don't realistically think they'll go 9-8. Like they're definitely a much better team than that. But I do think that their ceiling is probably around 14 wins for them. I mean, we saw how good they can play with injuries happening to the team. You know, a healthy Joe Burrow, I think, is great. Obviously, for the he's one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Then I do like the pieces that they added to this team as well over the course of the offseason. I think they addressed really solid pieces to continue to retool and kind of just bolster maybe some little holes that they had on the team.
Yeah. Looking at free agency before the draft, love the Trent Brown signing, love the Rankins signing, love Stone, love Moss. I think Moss is going to bring stability to the running back room, and you're not going to see a drop off from where Joe Mixon left. So I'm really excited about the Bengals season. It kind of like I'm glad they retained Jake Browning. He had a great season here. Going down the list, and T. Higgins putting the franchise tag, I thought it was appropriate. I thought it would be crazy if they like signed T. Higgins to this mega deal and weren't able to retain Jamar Chase. So that's going to be an interesting balance you have to deal with. But overall, I thought free agency went well. One move I really liked from the draft was Jermaine Burton out of Alabama. I love that selection. That's a savvy rookie wide receiver you got over there. And regardless of whether T. Higgins stays on the team or not after the next couple of seasons, you got another dynamic guy across from Jamar Chase who can win in his own right on certain routes. This is a great example of a situation fit for a player that may not be the most talented in the class. And because of that, I think he will produce a lot more than like more talented rookies this coming season because he just walked into an excellent situation. Same with Eric All as a rookie. So, like, just from the snapshot of free agency and the draft, those are things that stand out to me.
Yeah, I really like that pick too. And like, it's just the fact that he doesn't have to take a brunt of the load this upcoming season, I think is really nice. And while I don't think their depth is necessarily that great, they got guys that can at least fill in and, are okay, competent wide receivers that can play ahead of Jermaine Burton if he does need a little bit more development. Obviously he wasn't a first round or second round pick for a reason. Granted, that can always okay. But yeah, so like, I mean, he obviously can outplay those draft placements. Obviously, like George Kittle taken down far down the board is now like one of the best tight ends in the league, but he does have time to develop, which is really nice for him. And also, I really liked the Amarius Mims pick. If we're just kind of talking about some of our favorite selections, Trent Brown, he's just on a 1-year deal right now, and he's had kind of been slightly on and off with injuries, and so just knowing that you got Amarius Mims right behind him in the case of injury, or just letting Mims develop so that he can replace Trent Brown at that starting position next season, is something I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. Not much to talk about with their defense besides the Stone pick. That'll probably be one I think is a good get for them. That's something they needed to have. I'll be excited to see like how Cam Taylor-Britt, Mike Hilton play together. I think Taylor-Britt has some upside, and he'll continue to get better. I think Iosavas, Irving, and then Charlie Jones are better than a credit for, but I do think Burden has higher advantages, like as far as upside than they do. So, Iosavas especially, I think he's going to be a nice 3 for this team. I don't see him higher than that, but he's going to bring some unique things to this offense. And then having Gesicki as like a situational tight end is nice. I think Irv Smith was a nice like wish to have, and like you were like Hayden Hurst brought stability here. Like Gesicki's going to bring like how the heck did he make that throw? I mean, how the heck did he make that catch from like 20 yards out, like on that safety? Like, wow moments. But the good thing about like Gesicki, similar to Burden, is he doesn't have to be the number 1. He doesn't have to be the number 2 even. Like, this is a great situation for him to flourish.
Yeah, I like all the focus they had on this offseason on that tight end position. They take 2 in the draft. They bring in Mike Gesicki. You already got Drew Sample and Tanner Hudson there. So, like, you currently have 5 on the team right now. I don't think all 5 are on the start or on the official roster come, the start of the NFL season. But obviously the Bengals were able to recognize that this was a big question mark on their team, probably one of the biggest. Just because, like, I look at that list and, like, there's the potential, like, all 5 of those guys are not on this team next season, just with potentially all being bad. I mean, I'd hope that's not the case for them, but it was a question mark. But they brought in the guys to hopefully, get someone to stand out and be their tight end of the future, or at least the next couple seasons.
Yeah. Second-year breakouts here, just on the defensive side. DJ Turner's obviously already in the starting spot. I'm going to look for Myles Murphy to get more playing time. He's a high draft pick. I expect a lot of things from him. And then maybe Jordan Battle with like injury strike on the team. Those are 3 guys all on defense that I think are poised for breakouts and guys you should keep tabs on.
Yeah. Cam Taylor-Britt. He obviously starting, and he had a good season last season. I think he continues to develop.
Of course, I think you're cutting out for a bit, but if I heard you correctly, you said Cam Taylor-Britt's like a breakout for you?
Yeah, and he's going. I said he was going also into year 3, so it isn't necessarily a year 1 to 2 guy, but I do think that he's a guy that is still pretty young, has a lot of room to develop, but is still starting and had a pretty good season last year. So I'd like to see him kind of build off of that.
The one guy that worries me is on the coaching staff, Dan Pritchard. I don't know a lot about him as offensive coordinator. I feel like Zach Taylor will still call the shots, but similar situation with Dorsey. I'm a little worried about how the offense will change from that standpoint. So, obviously, Callahan did a phenomenal job as offensive coordinator for the Bengals these last couple seasons, but that would be one thing I would worry about. My X factor on this team, there's a lot. There's a lot of like quality players they have. I'm gonna go with Joe Burrow. I probably have to say Joe Burrow because the elbow is no joke. Nobody's like gone through that situation before. Stafford might have had a different like elbow injury, but like he is the engine that drives this entire team. If he's gone, and Browning played phenomenal. Browning is playing phenomenal. But like if Joe Burrow is gone, the ceiling from this team instantly drops from like 10 wins to like 6 wins in my mind. There's like I don't think they could go for the same season they did last year. Even with their schedule changes, because I'm looking at their schedule, like there's a lot of losable games here. Like if Joe Burrow's not they could lose to Dallas, Tennessee, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Like those are all possibilities. Whereas like with Joe Burrow, like I feel like they can nab like 80 to 90% of those games. So he's my X factor.
For me, I had Zach Moss here. Last season he played phenomenally in Jonathan Taylor's absence. And so obviously he needs to continue the greatness that he was showcasing last season into this year. Especially, if Joe Burrow still does need time to get to 100%. He's obviously, even if he's like Burrow's like 60% in terms of like his overall playing ability, like quality, they're probably going to keep him in there because Joe Burrow's at least healthy, and so being able to rely on a strong rush attack with Zach Moss, I think is really important for this team to at least start this season on a strong note. Maybe further down the year or season when maybe Joe Burrow's like fully in his mid to late season rhythm, then you don't necessarily need Zach Moss to be playing lights out, but at least to kickstart the season and kind of build up strong momentum early on, Zach Moss, I think, is going to be pretty pivotal to that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about that, you want Joe Burrow to increase the frequency and how many times he throws the ball. I think you made a great argument there with like handing out the volume early to Zach Moss. The one reason why I don't think like he's necessary, the X factor on this team, is because I think Chase Brown can take a step forward as well. I don't think it will all be on Zach Moss. Like, yeah, sure, it'll be nice if you have like a 20 to 25 carry back here, but like I'm picturing this more of like maybe a 17 and 10 kind of like carry structure. So I think Chase Brown can do some things and build on what he did last season, but it's a valid argument nonetheless because you do lose Joe Mixon, like a captain of this team, stalwart on this Bengals squad before they even had Joe Burrow. And I think Zach Moss is going to be a pretty important part of that, like start of the season, like when Burrow is like still trying to get his football instincts under him, coming off of that injury. So great pick there. Anything that stands out to you otherwise? Like we might have touched upon the rookies. I can't remember for the life of me.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the rookies. Yeah, overall, I do think that it felt kind of like a low-key off-season for them. Obviously, they brought in a handful of starters, both in the draft and through free agency, but it wasn't anything like it wasn't anything mind-blowing, I guess. So it kind of feels under the radar, but I feel like most of these teams in the AFC North had a big retool off-season where they had a lot of success last season, and they're just trying to build off of that. And I mean, like last season, I feel like the playoff race between these 4 teams were pretty neck and neck. Here, I have all their the worst ceiling I have here is 12-5 for the Steelers, and I have all these teams having an actual like a positive just record in general, and so that's kind of just it's a cool division to look at. I think it'll be, like you said in the beginning, it'll continue to be pretty competitive.
You're just a positive guy, Corstian. That's all.
I guess I am.
With that, guys, thank you so much for following us. We really appreciate it as we get our summer series underway. Yeah, Corstian, I'm back at it with the phone filters. It's been a while since I've seen that. Follow us at our Instagram at amon.a.mission. Oh, I was about to say you got wrecked, but came up there. we're gonna eventually update that at some point. I'm lying. It's gonna take another like 9 months to get a post out. But if you don't follow us there, follow us on our YouTube channel. I'm on a mission. 3 words there. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. And see you guys next week. We're gonna be talking about NFC North.
Yeah. Peace.
Bear down.